Mahatma Gandhi was an activist and civil rights leader. He helped lead the Indian independence movement, organizing boycotts and peaceful protests against British rule. Gandhi inspired people all over the world, including Martin Luther King Jr., one of the most famous civil rights leaders in the United States. Though the two men never got a chance to meet, King learned about Gandhi through his writing and a trip to India in 1959. King drew heavily on the Gandhian principle of nonviolence in his own civil rights activism. He wrote that, while the Montgomery boycott was going on, India's Ghandi was a guiding light of our technique of nonviolent social change. Nonviolence is more than simply agreeing that you won't physically attack your enemy. Gandhi referred to his form of nonviolence as satyagraha, meaning truth force or love force. Practicing satyagraha means a person should seek truth and love while refusing through nonviolent resistance. To participate in something he or she believes is wrong, the principle guided Gandhi's activism against the British Empire, helping India win its freedom in 1947. King first learned of Gandhi's concept of nonviolence when he was studying to become a minister. As a Christian, he connected the Hindu thinker's words to the biblical appeal of Jesus to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. King recognized the Christian doctrine of love operating through the Gandhian method of nonviolence. For the first time, he later wrote he saw that nonviolence was one of the most potent weapons available to oppress people in the struggle for freedom. King was already familiar with peaceful civil disobedience through American writers like Henry David Thoreau. He liked Gandhi's idea that oppressed people could use truth or love as weapons in their struggle for justice. However, he didn't find a practical application for it until he became involved in the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955 and 1956. At that time, the bus system in Montgomery, Alabama was segregated and African Americans were forced to ride at the back of the bus. King and other activists organized a boycott, and for over a year, African Americans across the city refused to ride all Montgomery buses. In his 1958 book, Stride Toward Freedom, King laid out the principles of nonviolence he'd used during the boycott. He affirmed that it is possible to resist evil without resorting to violence and to oppose evil itself without opposing the people committing evil. King also wrote that people who practice nonviolence must be willing to suffer without retaliation, internal or external. The nonviolent resistor not only refuses to shoot his opponent, but he also refuses to hate him. He saw nonviolence as an expression of love for all people, says Claiborne Carson, a history professor and director of the Martin Luther King Jr. Research and Education Institute at Stanford University in California. It's a way of reaching people and convincing them of the rightness of your cause. In 1956, the Supreme Court ruled that Montgomery's bus segregation was unconstitutional. Shortly afterward, King told a crowd in Brooklyn that Christ showed us the way, and Gandhi in India showed it could work. King wasn't the only civil rights leader who looked to Gandhi for inspiration. In the late 1950s, future Congressman John Lewis studied Gandhi in nonviolence workshops led by activist James Lawson. These workshops prepared Lewis for the sit-ins he and other students would later hold at lunch counters in Nashville, Tennessee. It is important to understand and feel that your attacker is as much a victim as you are, that he is a victim of the forces that have shaped and fed his anger and fury. Lewis wrote in his book, Walking with the Wind, if you can do that, you are well on your way to the nonviolent life. To better understand Gandhian principles, King took a 1-month trip to India at the beginning of 1959. There, he was pleasantly surprised to find that many people there had followed the nonviolent bus boycott he had helped organize. During the trip, King met with Gandhi's son, cousin, grandsons, and other relatives, and laid a wreath on his entombed ashes. King left India even more convinced of the power of nonviolent civil disobedience to effect social change. It was a marvelous thing to see the results of a nonviolent campaign, King wrote after his trip. The aftermath of hatred and bitterness that usually follows a violent campaign was found nowhere in India. Today, a mutual friendship was based on complete equality exists between the Indian and British people within the Commonwealth. I would say that after he returned, he was the most prominent living advocate for nonviolence, Carson says. He popularized a lot of the idea that Gandhi had, but through King, they spread throughout the United States and of course came to other parts of the world. Alright guys, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. It took such a long time to make between writing the script, finding the videos, and cutting out specific parts. So if you enjoyed it, why not subscribe? It costs nothing, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.